We begin tonight with breaking news. We have obtained what is expected to be a central piece of the government's case against Donald Trump. The actual audio recording of the former president talking as if he's showing a highly classified document on U.S. war plans against Iran with people not cleared to even know it exists, let alone what's in it. In a moment, only on CNN, you will hear what jurors will hear one day. The recording was made 2 summers ago, July 2021, at the former president's club in Bedminster, New Jersey. You will clearly hear the former president as he is speaking to several people. According to the special counsel's indictment, they include a writer working on Mark Meadows' memoir, the publisher, and 2 of Trump's staff members. The president was aware he was being recorded. This is the first time it is being played.
Okay, so the White House is in full panic mode right now, and I mean absolute hair on fire, fifth alarm panic mode. Because what just happened in Washington has completely upended everything Trump thought he had under control. Jack Smith, the former special counsel who Trump has spent the last 2 years calling a deranged prosecutor, a sleazebag, and every other name in the book, just delivered what legal experts are calling the most devastating blow to this administration since Trump took office. And here's the thing that makes this so absolutely brutal for the White House. They didn't see it coming, not like teasing, not with this level of detail, not with evidence so comprehensive, so meticulously documented that even Republicans on the Judiciary Committee were left scrambling to figure out how to spin what they just witnessed. We're talking about documents. We're talking about testimony. We're talking about communications that lay out in painstaking detail exactly what happened at Mar, exactly what Trump knew, exactly when he knew it, and exactly how far he and his team went to obstruct the investigation. Let me tell you something. This isn't going away. This isn't something that can be buried under another news cycle or drowned out by another Truth Social rant. This is the kind of evidence that rewrites the entire narrative of Trump's second term. Now, before we dive into exactly what happened and why this is such a massive deal, I need to say something. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. They've been bought and paid for by corporate interests, and they spin everything to fit their narrative. That's why we built this channel, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. We're not beholden to advertisers who want us to water down the truth. We're not afraid to tell you what's actually happening in Washington, even when it makes powerful people uncomfortable. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. We bring the news straight to you every single day. Just hit the subscribe button below to join us. If you want to support this work and be part of a community that truly cares about the truth, this is your moment. Subscribe. Leave a comment below telling us what you think about this situation, because we actually read them and we want to hear your perspective on this. All right, let's get back to the video. Here's what happened. Jack Smith walked into that closed-door deposition before the House Judiciary Committee, and what followed was nothing short of a legal earthquake. Now, remember, Chairman Jim Jordan had demanded this be a private session. He rejected Smith's offer to testify publicly. And at the time, a lot of people thought Jordan was making a smart political move. Keep it behind closed doors. Control the narrative. Cherry-pick the leaks. And make Smith look like the bad guy. But here's where things went completely sideways for Republicans. Smith didn't just show up to answer questions, showed up with receipts. We're talking about binders of evidence, communications between Trump's legal team and White House officials, internal memos that detail exactly how the classified documents ended up at Mar, who moved them, who ordered them moved, and crucially, who they were there and when. Sources inside the room were describing a scene where even the most Trump-loyal Republicans went silent. One source told reporters that the room went absolutely quiet when Smith began presenting communications. It showed direct coordination between Trump's inner circle and attempts to conceal the scope of the documents from federal investigators. We're talking about messages that explicitly discuss hiding boxers, messages that discuss misleading the FBI, messages that show a level of obstruction that goes far beyond anything we've seen publicly. And here's where this becomes even more significant. The documents Smith presented aren't just from his investigation. They include materials that the Trump administration itself has been fighting desperately to keep sealed. Remember Volume 2 of Smith's final report? The Judge Eileen Cannon has been sitting on for almost a year. The one that the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals just gave Cannon 60 days to rule on because she's been dragging her feet so long that appellate judges called it undue delay. Well, according to sources familiar with the deposition, Smith brought key excerpts from that very report. And what's in there is apparently so damaging, so comprehensive in its documentation of willful obstruction. It explains exactly why the Trump DOJ under Pam Bondi has been fighting tooth and nail to keep it buried. They knew what was in there. They knew that if the American public ever saw the full picture, it would fundamentally undermine every claim Trump has made about being the victim of a witch hunt. Let's break this down. What exactly did Smith present that has the White House in such a state? First, understand that this goes back to the fundamental question at the heart of the classified documents is, did Trump knowingly and willfully retain documents he knew he wasn't supposed to have? And more importantly, did he then take active steps to obstruct the government's efforts to get those documents back? Now, Trump's defenders have always tried to frame this as a simple paperwork dispute. Oh, every president takes documents when they leave office. This is just the deep state trying to criminalize something that's routine. You've heard that argument 1,000 times. Here's what Smith laid out in that deposition room. And here's why that argument completely collapses under the weight of actual evidence. The timeline Smith presented begins in January 2021, when Trump left the White House and boxers of materials were transported to Mar. Now, the National Archives knew almost immediately that documents were missing. They spent months trying to get them back through normal channels. In January 2022, after a year of back and forth, Trump's team finally returned 15 boxers. When the archives opened those boxers, they found 184 documents with classification markings. Some of them were marked at the highest levels of classification our government had. We're talking TSSCI material. Talking about documents so sensitive that even acknowledging their existence can be a national security risk. At that point, the FBI got involved. This is where the obstruction begins in earnest. In May 2022, the DOJ issued a subpoena demanding the return of all remaining classified materials. Trump's lawyers signed a certification claiming that a diligent search had been conducted and that all responsive documents had been returned. That certification turned out to be false. Demonstrably, provably, documented in writing false. In August 2022, when FBI agents executed a search warrant at Mar, they found another 100 documents with classification markings that Trump's team had sworn didn't exist. But here's what Smith revealed in that deposition that we didn't fully understand before. The concealment was active and ongoing. There were communications, contemporaneous communications, between Trump's aides discussing the movement of boxers specifically to prevent them from being found. There were discussions about what to tell lawyers, tell the archives, what to tell the FBI. And most damning of all, there were communications that showed Trump himself was directly involved in these, not through intermediaries, not through plausible deniability, direct involvement. Now, why does this matter so much? Because Trump has immunity now, right? The Supreme Court said so. He can't be prosecuted while he's president. But here's what the immunity decision doesn't protect: the historical record. It doesn't protect Trump's co-defendants who are still potentially on the hook. It doesn't protect the constitutional principle that no one, not even a president, is above the law. And it doesn't protect the Republican Party from having to answer for what they've enabled. Because, make no mistake, what Smith presented in that room isn't just about Donald Trump, about everyone who helped cover this up. Everyone who lied to Congress. Everyone who obstructed justice. Everyone who put their loyalty to one man above their oath to the Constitution. And here's where the political implications get really interesting. Heading into 2026, right? Midterm elections are less than a year away. Republicans have been operating under the assumption that they can run on the economy, run on immigration, run on the culture wars. And voters will forget all about the legal chaos surrounding Trump. Smith just did in that deposition room makes that calculation a whole lot harder. Because now there's a record. There's testimony under oath. There are documents that show exactly what happened and who was responsible. Democrats on the committee, led by Jamie Raskin, are already demanding that the full transcript be released. They're filing motions. They're doing press conferences, making sure the American people know that what happened in that room was significant. And even if Jim Jordan tries to bury it, even if Republicans try to spin it, the truth has a way of coming out. Let's talk about what this means for the institutions themselves. Because this isn't just a story about Trump. This is a story about what happens when the normal guardrails of American democracy get tested. The Justice Department, which is supposed to be independent, which is supposed to follow the facts wherever they lead, has been turned into a political weapon under Pam Bondi. We've seen career prosecutors pushed out for refusing to bring politically motivated charges. We've seen the DOJ refuse to release the Smith report despite having no legal basis for withholding it. We've seen the department prioritize protecting the president over protecting the rule of law. And what Smith's testimony makes clear is that this it's not just bureaucratic dysfunction. Deliberate. It's a conscious choice by the Trump administration to obstruct justice in plain sight, betting that their control over the institutions will protect them from accountability. But here's the thing about institutions. They're only as strong as the people who defend them. And right now, there are judges, there are career officials, there are members of Congress who are refusing to go along with this. Judge Kanan has been sitting on that volume to report, sure, but she's now under a 60-day deadline from the 11th Circuit. The appellate court essentially told her that her delays were unreasonable and ordered her to rule. That's not nothing. That's the judiciary pushing back. Democrats on the Judiciary Committee are filing amicus briefs demanding transparency, making sure there's a record of resistance. These might seem like small things in the grand scheme, but they matter. Matter because they established that not everyone went along. Everyone looked the other way. Not everyone decided that partisan loyalty was more important than constitutional duty. Now, let's talk about the international dimension. Because this doesn't happen in a vacuum. America's allies are watching. They're watching how we handle our internal crises. They're watching whether our institutions can hold. They're watching whether the rule of law still means anything in the United States. And what they've seen over the past year has not been reassuring. The classified documents at some of those involved intelligence shared by allied nations. Some of those involved military plans and capabilities that our partners trusted us to protect. That material was being stored in a bathroom at a beach club, moved around to avoid detection. When Trump's team was lying to federal investigators about what they had, our allies knew. They didn't say much publicly because that's not how intelligence relations work. But the damage to American credibility was real. And what Smith's testimony reinforces is that this wasn't careless. This wasn't a mix-up. This was willful disregard for national security, and our allies know it. NATO members are already making contingency plans for an America that can't be fully trusted. European intelligence services are more cautious about what they share with us. This is the real-world cost of what happened. And it doesn't go away just because Trump can't be prosecuted. Let's also talk about what happens next, because this story is far from over. Judge Cannon has until early January to rule on the motions to release Volume 2 of Smith's report. If she lifts her injunction and significant pressure on her to do exactly that, the full report becomes public. According to everyone who's seen it, including apparently some Republicans who left that deposition room looking shell-shocked, the full report is devastating. It's not just a recitation of facts. It's a documented case for obstruction of justice that would have resulted in conviction at trial if not for Trump's election victory. Jack Smith said exactly that in his earlier report on the election interference case. Confident he had enough evidence to convict. And now he's essentially said the same thing about the classified documents case. The evidence was there. The law was clear. And the only reason Trump isn't in prison right now is that the voters decided to give him immunity by putting him back in the White House. Think about that for a second. Really let it sink in. We have a sitting president about whom a special counsel has now testified under oath there was sufficient evidence to convict him of multiple felonies. Evidence of willful retention of classified materials. Evidence of obstruction of justice, evidence of conspiracy to conceal documents from federal investigators. Where we are as a country. And while some people might shrug and say, well, that's politics. It's not politics. The rule of law. It's the principle that the president serves the Constitution, not the other way around. It's the idea that accountability matters, that truth matters, that no one should be able to lie their way out of criminal liability just because they won an election. Now, I want to be clear about something. A lot of people are going to watch this and think, okay, but nothing's going to happen. Trump always gets away with it. The system is rigged, and I understand that. Frustration. Primera reagido. We've been through so many moments where it seemed like accountability was finally coming, only to watch it slip away. The Mueller investigation. The first impeachment. The second impeachment. Georgia case. Your case. Over and over, we've seen Trump survive things that would have ended any other political career. But here's why I think this moment is different. This isn't about whether Trump faces consequences personally. He's the president. He's got immunity. That ship has sailed for now. This is about the historical record. This is about establishing, beyond any reasonable doubt, what actually happened. This is about making sure that future generations understand exactly who Donald Trump was and what he did. And most importantly, this is about the people around. The enablers, co-conspirators, the officials who lied and obstructed and put their careers on the line to protect him. Those people don't have immunity. Those people can still face consequences. And the evidence that Jack Smith just put into the congressional record can absolutely be used against them. Here's another dimension that people aren't talking about enough. The Republican Party itself. Because right now, GOP is all in on Trump. They've purged they've embraced the MAGA base. They've made their bet that Trump's coalition is the future of the party. What happens when that bet starts to look shaky? What happens when swing voters in suburban districts start seeing the details of what Smith presented? What happens when independent voters realize that this isn't just lawfare or weaponization, but actual documented evidence of actual crimes? We're already seeing some movement in the polls. Trump's approval numbers have been underwater since the tariff chaos earlier this year. The economy isn't delivering the way he promised. And now, with Smith's testimony adding fuel to the narrative that Trump is corrupt and his administration is covering it up, Republicans in vulnerable districts are starting to get nervous. They're already getting asked questions they don't want to answer. Did you know about this? Do you support the cover-up? Why won't your party release the full report? These are the questions that keep campaign managers up at night. Let's also consider what the Democrats are doing with this. Because for once, they actually seem to have a coordinated strategy. Jamie Raskin and the Judiciary Democrats have been filing motions, holding press conferences, demanding transparency. They're filing amicus briefs in the court case to release two. They're sending letters to Pam Bondi demanding the report be produced. They're making this a sustained story, not just a one-day headline. And in the context of 2026, that matters. Democrats need an issue that energizes their base and appeals to independents. Republicans are covering up for a president who obstructed justice is a pretty compelling message. Not abstract policy debates, concrete. Here's what happened. Here's who's responsible. Here's who's trying to hide it. That's the kind of thing that can move. Here's a broader question, and it's one that we should all be thinking about. What kind of country do we want to be? Because what we're watching right now is a test. It's a test of whether democratic accountability can survive when one party decides that protecting their leader is more important than protecting the Constitution. It's a test of whether the institutions we've built over 250 years can withstand the pressure of a president who views them as obstacles rather than safeguards. And it's a test of whether the American people still care enough about the rule of law to hold their leaders accountable at the ballot box. Even if they can't be held accountable in a courtroom, I don't know how that test is going to turn out. Nobody does. But what I do know is that moments like this matter. What Jack Smith did in that debate, laying out the evidence, creating a record, refusing to let the truth be buried. That matters. What the Democrats are doing, fighting for transparency, demanding accountability, keeping this story alive, that matters. And what you do, staying informed, sharing information, voting, holding your representatives accountable, that matters too. So here's the bottom line. Jack Smith just delivered the most comprehensive account yet of what happened with the classified documents that were responsible and how far the cover-up went. The evidence he presented is so damaging that even Republicans who went into that room expecting to attack him came out looking shaken. The White House is in damage control mode, trying to spin this as more lawfare while simultaneously fighting desperately to keep the full report from ever seeing the light of day. Democrats are pushing for transparency and accountability. The courts are under pressure to release Volume 2, and the 2026 midterms suddenly look a lot more complicated for Republicans who thought they could avoid talking about Trump's legal problems. This story is far from over. Judge Cannon has until early January to rule on the report's release. Political fallout from Smith's testimony is just beginning. And the American people are going to have to decide in less than a year whether they want a Congress that's committed to covering up presidential misconduct or one that's committed to constitutional accountability. Keep your eyes on this. Watch how Republicans respond. Watch whether the media lets this story fade or keeps pushing for the truth. Watch what happens in the courts. And most importantly, let anyone tell you that it doesn't matter. It matters. Matters more than almost anything else happening in American politics right now. Because if a president can obstruct justice, lie to investigators, endanger national security, and face no consequences at all, then the Constitution isn't worth the parchment it's written on. And I refuse to believe that's the America we want to live in. It's a defining moment. Jack Smith understood that when he walked into that deposition room. The Democrats on the Judiciary Committee understand it. Judges who are being asked to rule on the report understand it. Now you understand it too. And what are you going to do about it? Because the answer to that question is going to shape American democracy for a generation. Keep watching. Keep demanding accountability. Keep fighting for the truth. That's what this moment requires. And that's exactly what we're going to keep doing on this channel every single day until the truth finally comes out. This could define the next decade of American politics. Don't look away. Let me add one more thing before we wrap up, because I think it's important. There's been a lot of talk in recent days about what kind of precedent this sets. Not just the legal precedent, though that's significant enough, but the political precedent, the institutional precedent, the precedent for how future presidents might behave when they think they can get away with it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody in Washington really wants to confront. If Trump faces no meaningful accountability for what he did with those classified documents, if cover-up succeeds, and the full report never sees the light of day, if the American people are denied the right to know what their president did and why, then we've just established a new norm. We've just told every future president that you can take whatever documents you want when you leave office. You can lie to investigators about it. You can obstruct justice to cover it up. As long as you win another election, nothing will happen to you. Think about what that means for us. Really? Think about it. The classified documents at Morago included information about our military capabilities, about our intelligence operations, about our relationships with foreign governments. Some of that information, if compromised, could have gotten people killed. American intelligence assets abroad, allied operatives who trusted us to protect their identities. Military personnel whose operations depend on maintaining the element of surprise. Correct. This isn't theoretical. These are real people whose lives were potentially put at risk because a former president decided the rules didn't apply to him and that his desire to keep trophies from his time in office was more important than national security protocols that exist for very good reason. Now, because of the immunity decision, because of Judge Cannon's delays, because of the willingness of Republicans in Congress to prioritize party over country, we might never have a full public accounting of exactly what information was compromised, who might have had access to it, and what damage may have been done. Not justice, not accountability, That's a system that's been rigged to protect the powerful at the expense of everyone else. And if we accept that, if we just shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's how politics works, then we've given up on the idea that America is a nation of laws rather than a nation of men. Now, I know some of you watching might be thinking, okay, but what can we actually do about this? I'm just one person. I don't have subpoena power. I can't force Judge Cannon to release the report. I can't make Republicans in Congress suddenly develop a conscience. I get it. But he made a reagido. The feeling of helplessness in the face of institutional corruption is real, and it's understandable. But here's what I want you to remember. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. It's not something that happens to you, something you participate in. And there are concrete things you can do right now to make a difference. First, stay informed. And I don't just mean read the headlines. Dig deeper. Read the court filings. Follow the reporters who are actually covering this story in depth. Understand the legal arguments, the procedural moves, the political dynamics. The more people understand what's actually happening, the harder it is for those in power to get away with distorting the truth. Second, contact your representatives. I know, it feels pointless sometimes, but congressional offices do track constituent contacts. They do pay attention when the phone lines light up. If you're represented by a Republican, ask them why they're okay with covering up presidential misconduct. If you're represented by a Democrat, tell them you support their efforts to release the full report and demand transparency. Third, vote. And not just in presidential elections. 2026 midterms are going to determine who controls Congress for the last 2 years of Trump's term. Those elections will shape whether there's any meaningful oversight of this nation, or whether the cover-up continues unchallenged. Fourth, and this is something people don't talk about enough, support good journalism. The reporters who are digging into this story, who are FOIAing documents, who are cultivating sources inside the administration, who are doing the hard work of holding power accountable, they need resources to do that work. Subscribe to outlets that do real investigative reporting, share their stories, amplify their work on social media. In an era where the president calls the press the enemy of the people and his allies are actively trying to intimidate and silence journalists, supporting good journalism is an act of democratic participation. And here's something else to think about as we watch this story develop over the coming weeks and months. The system isn't monolithic. There are cracks in it. There are people on the inside who are troubled by what they're seeing. Career officials at the DOJ who are quietly resisting politicized prosecutions, judges who are applying the law faithfully even when it's inconvenient for the administration, whistleblowers who are taking real risks to get information to Congress and the press. These people exist, and their actions matter. We may not see them all publicly, but they're there. Every lead, every piece of evidence that makes it out into the light, every court decision that goes against the administration's preferred outcome, represents someone somewhere who decided that their oath to the Constitution was more important than their loyalty to a political figure. The evidence that Jack Smith presented in that deposition room didn't appear out of nowhere. It came from people who documented what they saw, who preserved communications that might have been deleted, who cooperated with investigators even when there was pressure not to. Those choices, made by individuals at every level of government, are what make accountability possible, even in the most challenging circumstances. Every time someone makes that choice, every time someone decides to tell the truth rather than participate in a cover, it creates an opportunity for the system to work the way it's supposed to. Where does this leave us? We're in a moment of profound uncertainty. The constitutional order is being tested in ways it hasn't been tested in generations. The guardrails that we thought would prevent presidential abuse of power have proven weaker than many hoped. Yet, it isn't over. Far from Italiano. Jack Smith's testimony has created new pressure points. The 11th Circuit's deadline for Judge Cannon has created new urgency around the release of Volume 2. 2026 elections are approaching, and Republicans in swing districts are going to have to answer for their complicity in the cover. These are openings. They're not guarantees of accountability, but they're opportunities. And whether we seize those opportunities or let them slip away will determine what kind of country we leave to our children and grandchildren. So here's the bottom line. And I want you to really hear this. This matters. What Jack Smith revealed in that deposition room matters. The fight to release Volume 2 matters. Your attention, your engagement, your vote, your voice, it all matters. The forces trying to bury this story are counting on you to tune out, to give up, to accept that nothing will ever change and that the powerful will always protect their own. Don't give them that satisfaction. Stay engaged, stay informed. Stay angry if that's what it takes, because the arc of history doesn't bend toward justice on its own. It bends because people grab hold of it and pull. This is our moment to pull. I believe, truly believe, enough of us refuse to look away, refuse to be silenced, refuse to accept corruption as normal. We can still bend that arc in the right direction. The story Jack Smith told in that room isn't the beginning. And what happens next is up to all of us.